well, you're not pretty enough to play like the pretty girl, but you're not like quirky enough or weird enough to play the weird girl. And I was like, okay, so does that just mean like I can't be an actor? Like, what does that mean? That was what I was getting feedback on every single audition.
And she's a slim, cis-het, able-bodied white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. What hope in hell is there for most of the world? Sure, that's by Hollywood standards, but nobody wants to be average. Average is boring, it's dull. There's literally nothing else to say other than the norm. You just get completely overlooked. You are basically cellophane.
Walk right by me and never know I'm there.
One Direction wouldn't have had a song trying to woo a girl by singing, "That's what makes you average." Come on! In fact, most love songs or wooing songs, whatever you want to call them, go on about how beautiful and attractive the woman is. I mean, sure, maybe she's kind and sweet and smart and whatever, but... Actually, Akon, I am certain there is a way more respectful way you could have sang that. From Quinta Brunson's Playboy interview, I posted the green carpet selfie on Instagram. For the most part, the comments were kind and complimentary, filled with "yes girl" and "slay gorgeous." But there was one that stuck with me for 4 years. She's so average looking. I thought probably what everyone has thought, including the person who left the comment. In order to be worth something in this world, you have to be above average.
Am I pretty?
Olive, you are the most beautiful girl in the whole world.
Yeah, you're just saying that.
No, I'm not. I'm madly in love with you. And it's not because of your brains or your personality. It's because you're beautiful, inside and out.
Every generation across the world compares themselves to our peers. It's part of life, you know. Comparison can lead to good things. It can lead to your own self-improvement, but it can also be very detrimental if you become fixated on it and you go through a dark path like what I have in the past. And beauty, according to each societal standard, has been something that humans have been chasing for literal centuries, to the point of doing body modification. However, our social circles have grown these days thanks to social media connecting us to people from all around the world. It has wonderful benefits, which I definitely preach about all the time. But also it means that the comparison issue has grown as well. As I unpacked on this channel years ago, pretty privilege is indeed a thing. The benefits include when people are job hunting to how much they get paid, all the way to criminal convictions, and the harsher sentences don't tend to go to the prettier people. Along with the general assumption that pretty people equals nice person, but more on that later. Plus we know in the Western world and through Western influence, white supremacy rules when it comes to what is deemed to be the most beautiful. Khadijah has talked about it in these 2 videos here, which I'll link for you down below, but I'm sure you've already watched them. I know my channel analytics, okay, and where you're watching this video from, chances are the beauty standard is pale skin, fair features, slim able bodies, and that is considered to be the height of beauty. Just like I and others have talked about, the many issues with skin bleaching still continue to this day, to the point where in 2020, $8.6 billion was actually spent on skin bleaching that year alone worldwide. I'll also direct you to this amazing video from Teen Noir where it's about the average black woman and
a feature that removes you from being a black woman in the ordinary.
I mean, I can't say it any better than they can, alright? That's linked for you down below too. All of this media, messaging, and even the way our peers and parents talk to us can affect our self-image, our confidence, and self-esteem due to how conventional beauty is heralded as the best thing someone can be. It's especially important if you're a girl. Being an average kid gives no bragging rights to your parental figures, alright? And come on, you're a reflection of them. You are their legacy after all. I asked for your help with this topic to get everyone's different lived experiences, and thank you so much to everyone that participated and was so vulnerable and shared this with me. So there were... God, that can't be right. Let's turn things around to you and have a look at the demographics here. Looking at the ages, as you can see on the screen, 59.5% of people who participated in the survey are between 19 to 29 years, followed by 30 to 34, then 13 to 18, with just 10.3% over 35, so we have a young skew here. I also asked for people's gender, and I looked up the most inclusive way to put this rather than just having male, female, other, because I'm like, come on. And the reason behind even asking that to begin with is because of the way that gender is performed, and sadly people are valued based on their looks, especially if you're a woman. 71.6% female, 15.5% non-binary or non-conforming, 2.7% male. Thanks for joining, boys. 3.5% trans, 3.5% genderqueer, 0.8% prefer not to say, and then we also have people who are gender free, who are a combination of all of these things because, hey, you know what? Trying to fit everyone into one little box isn't something that is like easily done. Who'd have thought? Just like with most things in life. How were you regarded as a teenager when it comes to your appearance? Not reflecting on how you thought of yourself, but how others saw you. 22.5% unattractive or plain, 22.8% below average, 34.4% average, 16.1% above average, 4.2% beautiful, handsome, or striking. I don't know about you, but anytime I've gone out in public, I haven't thought nearly a quarter of the people around me are unattractive. The heavy skew could indeed be because of the topic of the video being about growing up average, but I also really didn't want to use the term ugly because...
I'm sorry, Toots! I guess you're too ugly!
Thumbelina taught us better than that, right? And also because if anyone other than, obvious bullies was calling teenagers and kids ugly, I need to go sort them out because that is Satan themselves. Why? Why would anybody be like that? It's horrible.
It's foolish to ask us to.
Now, what is foolish is being unreasonable about what you can achieve. I had thought that when you bought those dresses, it was only for your amusement, not that you earnestly believed you might find a husband in your 3rd year out.
Comparison is conveniently now at your fingertips anywhere you go. I need to do a separate video on our fixation on picking apart people's bodies because the amount of videos I see on this is just, it really bothers me, and it's something that I think we need to address, but I think we need to address the self-esteem aspect first, honestly, because I've been very open with you in the past in this video here about my BDD that I've struggled with and also my EDs that I've dealt with in the past as well, and all of this is very tied up with the comparison issue, right? Because we keep on comparing ourselves to our peers, we do not feel worthy, we don't feel pretty enough, which is especially prevalent if you're like a woman. It's not fun. And Snapchat dysmorphia is a real thing because people are actually taking pictures of themselves with a filter on to their surgeon, and it's like, the filters remove your pores. I cannot make you look like this. Do you find you compare yourself to how others look and pick apart other people's face, body parts, features in pictures, or even watch videos about plastic surgery that celebs have done? 23.6% rarely, 29.1% sometimes about particular people, 12.5% sometimes, mostly celebrities and trying to figure out if they've had surgery or Photoshop, 24.3% often, variety of people, famous or not, 10.5% very often. This was really interesting to me because it didn't matter how people regarded you growing up, whether they thought that you were unattractive all the way to being beautiful, because the answers actually varied across the board. One thing which I loved to see was how many younger people, like 13 to 18, already were not comparing themselves to others, and they didn't even fall into that trap, even if other people had called them unattractive. And I'm like, wow. Have you had a focus on picking apart your own body, trying to make it better by society's standards or to replicate those around you? 9.2% rarely, 30.2% sometimes on bad days, 16.2% frequently, 14.1% often, 30.3% very often, very conscious of myself and how I should look. And once again, there was no correlation between gender or age or how attractive or unattractive you were at all. It just varied across the board. The only real correlation to answers here was when it came to the comparison question beforehand. And one thing which I noticed from the freeform questions which came later was how many people would do similar things to me when it came to pretty people, especially when you're younger, when you're just watching them in awe and you're just like, I want to be like that. And so you observe everything and you're just like, okay, this is how they do their makeup, this is how they stand, this is how they walk, this is how they do all this stuff. And also in that same vein, there was definitely some bi panic, which a number of you actually identified with, because you're like, do I want to be them or do I want to be with them? But it did make me sad to see how many people were really conscious of the way that they looked and how they need to improve and really fixated on this. It's very concerning, but also completely unsurprising given the world that we've been raised in, given all of these messages which we've had for decades, and our family members have had this same messaging and they pass it on to us, and it's just, we need to give people better things than complexes about how they look. Did low self-esteem contribute to behaviour that may have been out of character for you or risky? Did this help you find confidence or make you feel worse? Now, there were some of you who happily, even if you got called unattractive or something, this didn't actually affect your self-esteem, and honestly,
wow.
I don't know about you, but low self-esteem can lead people down some very risky paths, and I've definitely been there, and a lot of you have as well. And there were two very common answers. One was that you were seeking validation from men in unhealthy and dangerous ways, and two was the ED path. And a lot of that actually correlated and crossed over and, well, hi. Even though we're separated through a screen, we're the same. I wish therapy was free for everybody. This was especially prevalent for girls because male attention and validation is seen as the thing to get, right? We're taught that from birth, remember? So especially if you're not seen as pretty and you've got low self-esteem, boy, does that make you an easy target for people to manipulate you. Even if the guys that you got involved with weren't necessarily bad, the main motivation behind even getting involved with someone or doing whatever with someone wasn't because you actually liked them, it was because you more wanted that validation. And that is where things are not good, okay? You should do things because you want to, not because this is the only way that I prove I'm worthy of something. Some of you also had the same sort of path as me, and you found empowerment from it, actually, as opposed to feeling shame about it, because so many people felt terrible about themselves and it made you feel worse afterwards. But there were a few of you who were saying, this actually made me feel more confident because I felt confident in my body and everything afterwards. So it can be good, it can be bad, but majority of people felt worse afterwards. It's also because the guys often treated you like scum. Isn't it interesting how that can happen? Wow, people treating you badly and then suddenly you feel bad. Can't imagine why that correlation exists. I would say low self-esteem and feeling like people found me to be average probably contributed a lot to my choices in early romantic partners. I thought I was lucky to get whatever I could, so I ended up with people who treated me poorly and didn't value me. I took the love I thought I deserved, and it was manipulative, unhealthy love that fed on my insecurities. I definitely wish my self-esteem had been better as a teenager, so I might have avoided this. These relationships would only make my self-esteem worse though, because it was in their best interest to keep it that way and to keep me desperate. It took years for me to understand that I deserve so much more than the bare minimum. This broke my heart to read, and honestly so many of your stories as well, because you know those skeezy pickup guys that go giving people like all this bro advice in the manosphere and stuff? They're the ones that are saying the things like, oh, this is why you should be with a girl who used to be ugly or used to be fat, because then they'll appreciate anything you toss their way. And it's like, oh my God, the fact that it's well known and advertised to exploit these vulnerabilities genuinely sickens me. I'm not going to go in depth here, but disordered eating and EDs were very common as well when it actually came to your responses to dealing with like this risky behavior from having such low self-esteem. This doesn't surprise me at all because diet culture is all around us. It's repackaged as wellness. We have family members shaming us all the time. Like I did that whole Christmas series about all of this stuff, you know? It's marketed as kind of like the cheapest, easiest way to make yourself worthy and acceptable to other people. You know, you can even think about those gym adverts. It's like, well, even though you're ugly, you can be fit and ugly as opposed to fat and ugly and all that. Ugh. I had an ED for many years, from 8 to 21. I hated myself. I felt like I was constantly taking up too much space compared to others around me. So not eating was my silent way of taking control of my confidence, because I thought confidence and pride was found in low calories and equally low scale number. Low self-esteem contributed to unhealthy eating patterns. It largely made me feel worse about myself. I was screaming in silence and people were complimenting me on my weight loss. I never felt that bad in my life. Moving on to the next thing that was most common was actually people just sort of opting out of things entirely and trying to just completely fade into the background and just not living life because you felt like you're not worthy to actually even take risks or do stuff because you're not pretty enough, because you're unattractive. And so it just sort of put your whole life on hold. I think it's mostly influenced my wallflower status. Like I didn't deserve to take risks because I wasn't pretty enough. And of course the standard which gets taught to so many girls in particular, well, if you can't be pretty then you better make up for it in other ways. You gotta be extra nice, you gotta be extra kind, you gotta be extra smart. Basically you become a people pleaser, which also has its many downsides. It was quite the opposite. I thought that if I can't be acceptable in the way I look, then I'll do my damnedest to be good, obedient and smart. I always encourage people to be kind and compassionate, but if you're doing so because you feel worthless unless you're serving others, that is a risky way to be, and I would really encourage unpacking this with a therapist.
What? You're all I ever wanted. You're beautiful.
Thank you. But what else?
What else?
Is beauty all that matters to you?
What else is there?
You should write a book.
How to offend women in 5 syllables or less.
Now, Mina Lay already has this amazing video which she made years ago, which I'll link for you down below, but the ugly duckling trope is so baked into so many of our movies, or the power of a good makeover, that it's sort of expected that you'll get a glow up, but what happens if you never really turn into a swan? There were some of you who did have that swan moment which gave you confidence, and I used to look like a potato with really dark circles under my eyes as a kid, and then when I became like about 15, 16, I started to grow into myself, and I had a bit of a glow up, I guess you'd say, but that was more because I was trying to mold myself after everyone that I admired. So I can speak to experience from going through that myself, but it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be less self-conscious or anything. So I asked people, how has your self-esteem been as an adult? As an adult, my self-esteem has improved. I'm trying to not define my worth by my looks. I also try and challenge my thoughts when they tend to be comparing myself to others. I can recognize other people's beauty without devaluing my own. Oh, I love this response so much. Seriously, snaps for you. It's amazing. It's definitely better now that society has come to a point where we find POC as attractive, versus growing up the definition of beauty and conventional attractiveness was always white. While skin colour diversity has definitely increased, we still deal with featureism, we still deal with fat phobia, we still deal with ableism. So there's some more shades in what's beautiful, but in terms of like symmetry, structure, everything else, you could even argue hair texture. Texturism is definitely still an issue. The box is widened a little bit as to what is conventionally attractive, but not very much, I would argue. I'd say the box for what is considered to be attractive is still quite small. AAPI grew up predominantly about 95% white communities, but moving to bigger, more diverse cities made me realise how much of my low self-esteem around appearance was overwhelmingly based on my perceived distance from whiteness. Self-esteem dramatically improved as I unlearned internalized racism. It's so sad that people even have to go through this to begin with in order to actually feel like worthy in yourself. It's bothers me so much, which is kind of why like that diversity box increasing a little bit is good, but like I said, I want it to be more. I'm an entitled millennial. I'm always going to be asking for more, okay? Sorting out my gender helped a lot. I actually see myself as attractive now. And looking back, I think my gender dysphoria badly impacted how I thought of myself as a teen. And this was another thing I saw from a number of you, was how when you were actually able to be your authentic self, like when you were able to get that gender affirming surgery, when you were able to actually just unlearn all of that toxic BS about how your gender should be and stuff, and that just freed you so much. A lot of you actually went through that experience, and it was honestly so heartwarming to see this. I loved reading all of those responses. I wish I had the time to include more, honestly. But then there are definitely still a lot of people who feel terrible about themselves. I've realised my self-esteem is almost completely dependent on how I look and being, quote, attractive. If I feel I don't look good to others, I don't feel good about myself. And there are sadly people of all ages, all genders that actually fell into this category. My self-esteem is practically non-existent. I'm 36 years old and have been told my entire life by my father and random men, romantic or not, that I have a manly qualities and manly hands and feet. Also, I'm fat, and that's played a part in my self-esteem. But I have PCOS, which makes losing weight very difficult. So I feel like I finally love myself in some ways, but it's so hard when I don't feel pretty enough, especially since I'm never approached by anyone when I go out. Isn't it horrible how gendered language can really screw all of us up? And Lena Norms has actually got this amazing video about her PCOS, so I will link that for you down below if you are also someone that suffers from it. It's such a huge insult if you're a cis straight woman to actually be called manly in any way, because straight men are pretty homophobic generally, and so they aren't attracted to things that are quote unquote manly. So it's basically saying that you're ugly and that you're just like, ugh, undesirable. Like when I was a kid, I had to wear corrective shoes and glasses, and I literally looked like a potato. And because my name is Bryony, you can imagine how that easily got interpreted to be Brian. And so there were a bunch of kids that were actually convinced that I was really a boy. People wonder why I'm so hyper feminine today. The features which are natural to us can be used against us. Say for example, if you have dark hair, so then maybe the hair on your arms is darker and it perhaps may be coarser, and you may have like the hair on your face maybe a little bit darker, darker, because all of us have hair on our face, by the way, just so you know, we all do, but it can be a bit darker, and so then people get called like a man and everything, and it just gets used against people. And especially if you have hormonal imbalances or other things which actually contribute to perhaps seeming more manly, or whatever it wants to be called, that can really get weaponized against you, and you just get beaten down even further. But there was one of you, I just really want to read this out. I like my body. I'm still not conventionally pretty, but I found my style and my value. I still feel a little too chunky and masculine on the beach sometimes, so I tend to be more active and avoid large crowds. Other than that, I learned to like my broad shoulders, strong arms and legs, and somewhat sharp features. My body is a wonderful tool, and the way it looks makes me who I am. I really like that. And also, this is one of the times where I really do want to go promoting body neutrality, and a number of you are bringing this up as well, how embracing body neutrality has really helped your self-esteem, but it does take a lot of work. There are so many of you who are saying, I'm better than I used to be, but it's taken me such a long time to get here. It takes a lot of work. And the thing is, right, what I really noticed was when we're little, when we're teeny weeny little kids, our self-esteem is normally pretty high, but it's only from the external factors around us and this comparison thing which we get taught how to do and then just gets pushed on us by media, by advertisers, by everything. That is when we actually have crushed self-esteem, and then you have to build yourself back up. And it's once again why I think that once you're over 30, you actually genuinely become happier. I know that I definitely have, because I can see all of the BS, because I can see that the only way that women are valued or seen as pretty is when they are naive, when you are subservient, when you're serving others, and when you feel terrible about yourself, therefore you're easily molded. And once you see that, it is so much easier to just be like, I don't care what you think, bud. You know what I mean? But it sadly takes quite a long time to get there, so I hope to speed up the process with videos like these. Like, for example, it's better but still not great. I have a weird relationship with eating and exercise, which I fluctuated very strangely throughout adulthood. I think my self-image has impacted my confidence and ability to put myself out there, and I often look at myself and weigh myself. I also experience some dissonance between how I see myself in the mirror and how cameras see me, because I'll feel great some days until I see a photo of myself. This is where I really want to stress to you, camera lenses distort you. So what you see in the mirror and then you see it on camera, you're like, oh god, I look like that. Okay, so Alex LDN on Instagram has actually done a really great video about this, but different camera lenses, different angles, different lighting, that all plays a huge part in how you actually appear on camera. I mean, why do you think all millennials did the classic hip hop with your arm on your hip? It was to make our arms look slimmer. All of this other rubbish that we used to do. And I'll be talking about that when we get to the Cosmo video next time, okay? I still struggle with my self-esteem, but when I practice self-forgiveness, it made me realize that when I walk past people, I see so much beauty in what they may see as imperfections. And it makes me happy because I can find beauty in what they themselves may deem ugly. Then who's to say there may be people who find me beautiful too? Plus, age feels like a free get-out-of-jail card in that I don't care what others think about anymore. I love this because I personally love to compliment people when I see that they've done some form of self-expression, whether it's in the way that they've styled their clothes, or I see someone with a cool tattoo. Tattoos always get me, or how they've painted their nails, or how they've done the makeup, or whatever self-expression thing that they've done, because that is how someone is showing who they are, as opposed to the fact that, you know, it's like complimenting someone on their nose. They can't change their nose without surgery. You know what I mean? It's like, that's something that you're born with, whereas the self-expression is stuff that you do. And I also think that we should be okay with complimenting people more, because I think it's a really positive thing to do. And this applies to all genders, especially guys actually, because they do really like getting these little compliments. Even if they are just like shrug it off, it's like, you see this little chest puff as they get a bit happier. I don't know, I just like to try and make people happy if I'm able to. And one of the biggest things that boosted people's self-esteem for those who have actually increased their self-esteem as they've become adults was, funnily enough, not being surrounded by assholes. Who would have thought that could happen? Finding a new community, meeting new people, making new friends, found family, all of that good stuff, where you're actually around people who value you for who you are, as opposed to just looking a certain way, then picking other people apart and comparing and doing all of that stuff. Trust me, if you're surrounded by good people and people that aren't projecting their internalized misogyny, that aren't just putting people down all the time, you will feel so much happier. And sadly, this is one of the times where you're actually bringing up your parental figures and how negative their impacts because of their internalized misogyny and the way that they just kept picking at you and this impact on you. Realizing that you don't have to find value from what your parents think of you is one of the most freeing things I think you can learn.
Life sure comes easy for the beautiful.
You know, before I had the nose job, I had no problem being taken seriously. Maybe when they removed that bit of cartilage, they pulled out my brain by mistake.
Pretty people are vain, vapid, and stupid, and they are not to be trusted.
Duff. D-U-F-F. Designated ugly fat friend.
What did you just say to me?
It's not like a big deal, okay? I mean, like, every group of friends has one, you know? The one who doesn't look as good, thus making their friends look better. The one who's approachable and easy to talk to because no one's trying to get in their pants.
The Duff illustrates this issue incredibly well. I'm sure that you've all seen it already. But you know, when it comes to TV shows, when it comes to sitcoms, when it comes to movies, whatever, there's always like the hot friend, the desired friend, the whatever, like the main character is typically the very pretty one. Or the bullies. And it does have to be said it's not quite the same way for men because average or ugly guys keep on getting with beautiful women. And it still happens today. It's not just history, not just in the olden days when it comes to rom-coms and stuff. It still happens today. Look at movies like Long Shot. But when it actually comes to average women with attractive men, they had a makeover. They had a makeover. The good main characters show themselves as being smart, as having more natural beauty, as being less flirtatious, as being like all of this other purity nonsense stuff, right? And it even comes to the point where we just kind of relish in the schadenfreude of actually seeing like the pretty girls suffer, be put in their place, because you really want to pull them down a peg, right? And I'm really sad because Girl on Film had this incredible video about hot girls in horror, and it got taken down because of demonetization, because I've been there, okay? YouTube sucks, seriously, when it comes to its censorship. But in that, they were talking about the schadenfreude that people feel from watching these girls suffer, from watching these beautiful bodies just get ripped apart as kind of like a punishment in a way for the way that people wish that they could punish pretty people. However you view people who are conventionally attractive or who can meet that criteria, have you held a negative bias against them or dealt with jealousy? Maybe not wanting to be friends with them or trust them, or thought they didn't work hard enough, perhaps that they were stupid? Unsurprisingly, jealousy was the most common feeling here, with 258 of you experiencing that, along with envy. Jealousy and envy are two separate things. I will just have that definition up on the screen now, but I'm sure that you've already seen the ContraPoints video, which I'll also link down below. Oh my gosh, I'm just linking everyone's videos today. There are just so many great people on YouTube, alright? I've always been envious of naturally beautiful people, and a lot of the ones I personally know are also amazingly kind and intelligent individuals. All of these factors being present in one person make me hyper aware of what I perceive as my inadequacies, a fact that I wholly recognise as a me thing and not to be blamed on the other person. Tell me you've been to therapy without telling me you've been to therapy, or that you are super self-aware. Wow, that's impressive. They benefit from lookism, but I don't hold it against them. I do feel envious and at times intimidated, but I don't automatically feel like they're stupid or mean. When I was younger, there was a sense of distrust, but I think that's due to the media presenting beautiful or sexy women as untrustworthy and unfairly protected from hardship. They are subject to misogyny, same as any woman. And then joyfully, internalized misogyny comes up quite a lot of times because of the way that your parents raised you and because of how you were able to actually cope with getting through high school and all that other stuff. Jealousy. I was told that hot girls were shallow and brainless and believed it growing up to make myself feel better. There were people who thought they had an easier ride in life and that life just came easy to them, but you know, it's the whole grass is always greener approach. But there were also people who hold very negative bias against conventionally attractive people, completely don't trust them, think that they must just be basic people, think that they just cruise by in life and don't really have anything worthwhile to add. And some of you actually said this because you were previously bullied, so it just makes you inherently distrust people. And again, this is where I just implore people to hopefully be able to get some therapy. Again, it needs to be way more accessible than it is. But just because some people have bullied you who are attractive, as I've definitely dealt with, doesn't mean that all attractive people are like that. Like people have pointed out, they're friends with really attractive people and they're genuinely nice people. And there were people who also felt really inadequate anytime that you're actually around attractive people because you just can't stop comparing yourself to them. And it's also like their struggles don't seem real because you're like, well, you're beautiful. What do you mean you can't find a decent date or anything? I found it frustrating more than anything, and it's awkward when they've complained to me about problem finding partners. It makes me uncomfortable. It was hard to be supportive, which made me feel like a terrible and superficial person. Like, Trust me, I get this feeling because you're like, you're pretty, you're smart. Like, how are you struggling to find someone? If you're struggling, I'm a troll. How am I meant to find anyone? You know what I mean? Again, it comes down to this whole male validation thing and all of this malarkey, basically.
And you are lucky to have so much notice, even if it is trying. For some of us, the notice is very slight.
But it's also like, who is hitting on them? How are they doing it? Do they even respect them, or do they just see them as being a piece of meat? Do they just objectify them? Do they actually treat them like they don't even have a brain? Because I've been on both sides of this, where I've strongly resented people because I wasn't being approached by anybody, all the way to just being like thought of as an airheaded bimbo and having everybody just like dismiss me and be mean to me. So it's, you know what I mean? It's like, I can see it from all sides is what I'm saying here.
Trump had this to say about a woman who accused him of groping her on a plane years before.
Believe me, she would not be my first choice, that I can tell you. Man. You don't know. That would not be my first choice.
But nobody wants to touch you. Nobody would even believe you if you said anything. When people doubt the suffering of others as they're not what they deem to be attractive or warranting of attention, we get into some very murky depths of ableism and violence, sadly. AP News reported in Italy, a court that ruled a woman couldn't have been a victim of grapes because they were too ugly. And you know what? Trump has also used this line as well, and it's even scarier because he gets cheered for saying this stuff. Her ego's too big. She's not that pretty. She needs to be pulled down a peg. You know, it's speaking to this darker side inside all of us to try and get them to actually side with the alleged perpetrator. I have to be very careful because I don't want to get sued. The perversity of the too ugly argument also has a chilling effect on reporting, making victims who lack confidence in their appearance further doubt whether they will be believed. Most victims are already hesitant to disclose, whether to fear of retaliation, shame, self-blame, or doubting that others would even believe their allegations, said Carol Weiss, a sociology professor. Insulting their self-esteem is just another account that re-victimizes women and keeps victims silent. And research actually backs this up, as reported in the Seattle Times by Nicole Brodeur. The study involved 4,000 participants and used digitally manipulated headshots and written scenarios. There was an exercise where participants were asked to draw a typical victim of harassment. The study found that people were more apt to believe harassment claims by women who are young, conventionally attractive, and appear and act feminine. Women who don't fit that prototype not only are less likely to be believed, but they're also presumed to be unharmed by harassing behavior. And this is the very concerning thing to me, which absolutely silences victims. And you know what? It's multi-layered as well, because you have ableism coming into play here, you also have racism, you also have homophobia and transphobia. It is multi-layered, and marginalized people are more likely to actually be targeted, and it's even harder for them to even come forward, because if you're trans, you risk being outed. If you are disabled, then you may have less funds, so you're less able to actually come forward, and plus the person that's doing the stuff can actually be like your support system, so that makes it even harder as well. And when you're BIPOC, studies have actually found that police dismiss you more often than not. So this is what I mean about always stressing the importance of intersectional feminism and actually making sure that we're listening to everybody around us. This is a real dark underbelly to ableism, transphobia, homophobia, racism, and it's all multi-layered, and it just makes people even more vulnerable, and it's something that we need to consciously be aware of, which is why I really wanted to include it in this video. That song's going to be stuck in your head all day, right? You're welcome, as we come to the end of this video. So what can we do? Now, this is where I want to read out another one of your responses. One of my biggest fears is becoming one of those older women who openly resent younger women for their youth and beauty, and instead of guiding and protecting them, makes life harder for them. I've known women who are like that, and I'd rather drop dead right now than grow into them. Big time, and I am so glad that you pointed this out. Making sure that we don't fall into this internalized misogyny is so important, so we can actually help the younger generations cope with the BS that exists in the world, in this patriarchal society that we all have to try and exist in. Because if we have this internalized misogyny and then project that onto younger generations, then it's only going to harm them further the same way that we have been harmed ourselves. And everyone is always empowered to break the cycles in which they've grown up in, right? I definitely believe that. It's kind of like this whole channel, right? We need this solidarity for each other, and especially for the youth. As you can see from a majority of these survey results, those younger years outside of our very young childhood screwed up our self-esteem. And if we had those great older figures to look up to, as opposed to having them berate us for not dressing right, acting right, looking right, or not being smart enough, like whatever it may be, we're only leading them to actually mistrust aging further and fall into the false narrative of being the bitter older woman. Because so many people always say, any time that I bring up about how predatory guys can be towards younger girls, because I've been there, so many of us have been there, they always say, oh, it sounds like you're bitter, sounds like you're resentful. It's like, no, I want to look after people and protect them and stop you from being a scumbag. And you're just angry that I'm calling out your scumbagginess. But then it gets framed as being bitterness. Whereas if you are actually saying all of this internalized misogyny stuff, saying, oh, you're asking for it if you're dressing that way, if you're doing all of this slut shaming, then you're actually making the problem worse, is what I'm saying. Oh, gosh, there's so much that we learn in life and then have to unlearn. It's tiresome, I swear. Now, Cheyenne Lynn recently did a video after my survey had closed about subjective beauty and objective ugliness, which I'll also link for you down below. And I noticed that so many people were commenting saying, getting rid of social media was the best thing I could have done for me. And I really just want to say, before you go suggesting that, getting rid of social media, I personally think, just means that your village becomes smaller, your worldview becomes smaller. I even commented this on their video. I said, diversifying your social media is the best way forward, because there are so many different lived experiences in the world. There are so many people's different abilities, different skills, different everything which exist on social media. You wouldn't be here right now unless you had social media, right? Because that's what YouTube is. And also seeing all different faces, different bodies, different abilities, as opposed to just looking at conventionally attractive people that exist in that little box that I talked about before. You know what I mean? And like I mentioned before, one of the best things when it actually comes to dealing with EDs and everything like that, other than obviously getting proper help, is to embrace body neutrality. I really do recommend looking into it. I'll have some resources for you down below as well, because just recognizing the things that your body can do, accepting the things it can't, accepting sometimes you don't feel great, and just carrying on anyway, like, that's been one of the best things for me personally, and maybe it will help you. I know it's helped a number of other people. I know it helped a number of you in the survey as well. And also I think that we really need to let go of this expectation that if you are average, that you're not worthy, that your life doesn't deserve to be photographed, that you don't deserve to, you know, have people just be nice to you, that you don't deserve respect. Just like Quinta Brunson was saying in the interview I brought up at the very start of this video, embracing averageness and just enjoying life, enjoying those smaller things, enjoying your community around you, enjoying all of that stuff, and finding worth from that is way more beneficial than striving to always be exceptional and beating yourself up if you're not exceptional. If you made it all the way to the end of this very long video, leave the phoenix emoji, because I do believe that we can absolutely rise from the ashes of dealing with low self-esteem. And thank you once again to everybody that participated in the survey. It was so kind of you. I loved reading through your responses. And again, I always do encourage people to get mental health support if they're able to, but I also understand how inaccessible it is. So being involved politically is also a great thing to do. And speaking of politically being involved, I will also have links to donate to when it actually comes to the gen that is happening in Palestine at the moment, because I know that I talk about it on my Instagram stories all the time, but I don't really talk about it very much here, so I'll just have that linked for you down below in case you want to be able to actually do something. But ultimately, again, this is where politics comes into play, and where reaching out to your representatives is very important, and how you vote is very important, all the other stuff I talk about all the time. I will see you all soon again for a more light-hearted video, because I think that we need it. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!